total power grid collapse.
We're coming for you, man.
First floor roof is starting to fall in.
It created a humanitarian crisis.
So, you're Texas in February 2021. You're the second largest state in America. You've got your own power grid that you're super proud of. And you've been telling everyone for decades that you don't need the federal government's help with anything.
It's the center of the wind energy industry. In the United States, we have this wind corridor, comes off of this Chihuahua Desert. At least erase some frowns. Maybe it's done some of it.
You're energy independent, baby. You've got oil, you've got natural gas, you've got wind farms. You're basically the energy capital of the world. And then Winter Storm Uri hits.
Donald Trump was in Central Texas on Friday to survey the damage from devastating floods that killed at least 120 people.
In less than a week, your entire power grid collapses. 4.5 million people lose electricity. At least 246 people die.
Oh my God, I think I hit one of them. I'm confused. My car was spinning. There's a gentleman in a car next to me. He's just screaming.
Though some estimates put it as high as 702, your state suffers $195 billion in damage, making it the most expensive disaster in Texas history. But here's the kicker.
Tragedy struck the Texas Hill Country this week as sudden, massive flooding over the July 4th holiday killed over 100 people and destroyed hundreds of structures.
This wasn't just a natural disaster. This was a preventable catastrophe that happened because Texas ignored the same warnings for 32 years. The same exact warnings. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand how a state that prides itself on being prepared for anything became completely defenseless when it mattered most. Let me paint you a picture of what February 15th, 2021 looked like in Texas. It's 1:25 a.m. and the frequency of the Texas power grid drops below 59.4 hertz. Now, if you don't know what that means, let me explain. When the grid frequency drops that low, you're basically watching the entire electrical system start to die. And once it hits a certain point, automatic safety systems kick in and shut down the entire grid to prevent permanent damage.
Instead of mandating adequate supply to prevent blackouts, that they would allow the power generators to earn more, to charge more when the demand exceeded supply.
The grid operators at ERCOT, that's the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, are watching their screens in absolute panic because they know that if the frequency keeps dropping, the entire state of Texas will go dark, not just rolling blackouts, complete darkness for weeks, maybe months. At 1:29 a.m., they make the call, start shedding load, cut power to millions of people to save the grid. But here's the terrifying part. According to ERCOT's own data, they were 4 minutes and 37 seconds away from total grid collapse. 4 minutes. If they had waited just 4 more minutes to start those rolling blackouts, the entire Texas power grid would have shut down automatically. And when I say shut down, I don't mean like flipping a light switch that you can just turn back on. I mean a complete system failure that would have taken weeks or months to restore. Imagine the entire state of Texas, 29 million people, without electricity for months. That's how close Texas came to a complete societal collapse. Now, you might be thinking, okay, Larry, but this was an unprecedented storm, right?
Genome is, as you know, been there, and it will continue to be there. And we're working very close with representatives from Texas, and it's a horrible thing that took place. Absolutely horrible. So we say God bless all of the people that have gone through so much.
Nobody could have seen this coming. Wrong, dead wrong. Let me take you back to December 1989. Texas gets hit by a severe cold snap. Power plants fail, rolling blackouts across the state. Sound familiar? After that disaster, regulators make recommendations. Winterize your power plants, they said. Protect your infrastructure from cold weather. Texas says, nah, we're good. Fast forward to February 2011. Another severe winter storm hits Texas. This time it's called the Groundhog Day blizzard. Rolling blackouts affect 75% of the state. Millions lose power. Roads become impassable. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, conducts a massive investigation. They release a 357-page report in August 2011. The report is crystal clear. Texas power plants will fail in sufficiently cold conditions unless they're winterized. The report specifically says, and I quote, generators did not adequately anticipate the full impact of extended cold weather and high winds. FERC makes specific recommendations. The North American Electric Reliability Corporation backs them up. Everyone agrees. Texas needs to winterize its power infrastructure. Texas looks at the report, looks at the price tag for winterization, and says, nah, we're good. So when Winter Storm Uri hits in 2021, it's not like Texas was caught off guard by some unprecedented event. They had been warned multiple times for 32 years. But let's talk about what actually failed during Winter Storm Uri, because the story you probably heard from Texas politicians isn't the real story. Governor Greg Abbott went on TV and immediately started blaming renewable energy.
This shows how the Green New Deal would be a deadly deal for the United States of America. Our wind and our solar got shut down, and they were collectively more than 10% of our power grid. And that thrust Texas into a situation where...
This shows how the Green New Deal would be a deadly deal for the United States of America, he said. He specifically blamed frozen wind turbines. There was just one problem with that narrative. It was complete bullshit. Wind power accounts for only 23% of Texas electricity generation, and while some wind turbines did freeze, they actually performed better than expected. The real problem was natural gas. Natural gas provides about 40% of Texas electricity, and when the cold hit, the entire natural gas supply chain collapsed. Wellheads froze, processing facilities shut down, pipelines failed. Power plants that relied on natural gas couldn't get fuel. Natural gas power generation dropped by 26,000 megawatts during the storm. Wind power only dropped by about 4,000 megawatts. So Abbott was blaming the energy source that failed the least while ignoring the one that failed the most. Coal plants failed too. Nuclear plants shut down when their safety systems detected problems. Even solar panels got covered with snow and ice. The problem wasn't renewable energy. The problem was that Texas had spent decades refusing to winterize any of its power infrastructure. Now you might be wondering, why didn't Texas just import electricity from other states when their grid started failing? Great question, and the answer reveals the fundamental arrogance that led to this disaster. Texas deliberately isolated its power grid from the rest of the United States. They have very limited connections to the eastern and western power grids. Why? Because connecting to the national grid would mean federal oversight. And Texas doesn't like federal oversight. See, Texas deregulated its electricity market in the 1990s. The idea was that competition would drive down prices and improve efficiency, and in some ways, it worked. Texas had relatively cheap electricity for years, but deregulation also meant that power companies focused on cutting costs, not improving reliability. Winterization was seen as an unnecessary expense. Emergency preparedness was just money down the drain. The Texas grid became what energy experts call energy-only market.
Bloomberg's editor-in-chief emeritus argued in an opinion piece today that renewable energy is not the culprit here.
Absolutely front and center. And historically, fossil fuels have dominated global power supply precisely because fossil fuels were far cheaper.
Power companies only get paid when they're actually generating electricity. They don't get paid for having backup capacity or emergency preparedness, so guess what they didn't invest in? Meanwhile, other states that remained connected to the federal grid had to meet federal reliability standards. They had to maintain reserve capacity. They had to coordinate with neighboring states during emergencies. Texas said, "We don't need any of that. We're Texas." Let's talk about the human cost of this arrogance. The official death toll from Winter Storm Uri is 246 people. But that's just the confirmed deaths. A BuzzFeed News analysis estimated the real death toll could be as high as 702 people. These weren't just statistics. These were real people with real families. There was Cynthia Pierce, an elderly woman living in a senior apartment complex. When the power went out, the building's heating system failed. She died from hypothermia in her own home. There were at least 19 people who died from carbon monoxide poisoning.
When she talks about death, the first thing she says, she always prays for God to take her while she's asleep. just to die of just freezing to death, I can't imagine just what she might have went through. So I pray.
Because they were trying to heat their homes with cars, grills, or generators that weren't meant to be used indoors. There was a family in Houston who burned furniture to stay warm, a grandmother in Dallas who froze to death in her bed, children who died because medical equipment failed when the power went out. And while these people were dying, some energy companies were making record profits. Energy Transfer, one of the largest pipeline companies in Texas, made $2.4 billion during the storm. That's billion with a B. They made more money in 1 week than they usually make in an entire year. How? Because when supply gets scarce, prices go through the roof. Wholesale electricity prices in Texas normally run about $50 per megawatt hour. During the storm, they hit the legal maximum of $9,000 per megawatt hour. So what would it have cost to prevent this disaster? According to industry estimates, winterizing a natural gas wellhead costs about $20,000 to $50,000 per well. For power plants, the costs vary, but we're talking about millions of dollars per facility, not billions. Let's be generous and say it would have cost $10 billion to properly winterize Texas's entire energy infrastructure. That sounds like a lot of money, right? But Winter Storm Uri caused $195 billion in damage. Texas was too proud and too cheap to learn from its own mistakes. Remember that sometimes the disaster they could have prevented is the one that kills you. That's all for today's briefing. I'm Larry, just another guy in his basement trying to make sense of this crazy world. If you found this useful, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments. Do you think Texas will actually learn from this disaster, or are they doomed to repeat it? Stay informed, stay skeptical, and stay warm out there.